Insects need water. They also need plants. Dragonflies need insects. And birds need insects too. All summer long, that food chain is working quietly around us. But when fall slips in and the evenings get cooler, the birds' world changes with them. And that's when I bring back the feeders. The days are getting shorter. The mornings are colder. The birds, they spent the summer raising their young. They've been nesting in the forest. They've been making a living from what the land provides. But now, as fall is slipping in, it's time to bring back those bird feeders. I don't keep my feeders running year-round. From May till the end of August, I usually pull them up and let the birds fend for themselves in the forest. It's just the natural way. Because there's insects everywhere, there's seeds, there's berries, there's flowers, and lots of food sources. And they need to learn to forage naturally. But for me, when the seasons change, the end of August, and the fall starts to slip in over the winter, it's something satisfying about letting the birds use my backyard as their natural world and help supplement their food through their feeders. My forest is still full of life, but the menu is starting to look different. For birds that stay here through the colder months, winter is completely different. It's a challenge more than summer. They have to spend more energy simply staying warm. Finding enough food becomes increasingly important. And that's where my little feeders come into the picture. I'm not meaning to replace the forest. They're just one more food source available to the birds when they find the natural supply becoming harder to find. Before I put them out, I like to give everything a good cleaning. They've been sitting through the season, and if they're going to become a regular food source, they need to be kept clean. I'm going to give them a good washing and a rinse, and once everything is dry, it's time for the parts the birds are going to appreciate a little more. Food. You know you're putting something small into motion when you fill up a feeder and hang it up and walk away, and then eventually the forest notices that they're there. One of the many favorite things about having the feeders isn't actually the feeding, it's seeing what shows up. Every species seems to have its own personality. Some birds arrive confidently and take what they want. Others will hang back in the trees and wait. Some will grab a single seed and disappear, and others seem to think the feeder belongs entirely to them, not to mention the common red squirrel. And then there are the birds that you don't see for weeks at a time until suddenly they're back again. That's one of the things I love about watching wildlife this way. You don't completely control what happens. You just create a place where something interesting might happen, and then you wait. As you can see from my playlist and the bird watcher's delight, it's been a great experience with the variety of birds that visit me. I think that's an important part of why I like doing this. Learning about the different species, understanding their behavior, seeking out new ones, taking photographs, and sharing it with you. The feeder is only the small picture. The real food source is still going to be the forest, the trees, the seeds, and the berries. The insects may still be out there hidden in the tree bark, places where birds can shelter, but the whole ecosystem. The feeder simply just adds another option, especially as we move forward to the months where finding food becomes difficult as the snow covers the ground. Out here, everything as can be is connected. What happens in the forest determines what comes to the feeder, and what happens around the feeder is just a tiny glimpse of what's happening throughout the woods. Living out here off-grid has changed the way I notice these little things. When you spend more time outside like I have been, you start noticing patterns. When the first birds return, when some birds leave, like the hummingbird, and when insects start disappearing, when certain trees and plants start producing seed, when the mornings suddenly become quiet and there's a heavy dew on the ground and a coolness in the air, and when the birds begin looking for more dependable food sources again. It's easy to think of wildlife as something that's separate from us, but when you live alongside it every day, as I have been doing, you start realizing that you're sharing the same little piece of landscape. We're all responding to the same seasons. Right now, fall still feels a little generous. The colors are just barely changing in the forest floor. There's still some food, but in a little over a month, winter's coming. Bright autumn mornings will turn into frozen ones eventually. And then the feeder's going to become a little more important each day. Not because the birds can't survive without it, but because every available food source can matter when the weather becomes difficult. That's what makes this seasonal routine worthwhile to me. I'm not trying to tame the wildlife. I'm just giving them another option while they're passing through the changing seasons. You will recall from my last video how all the insects were hanging around the pond, and the dragonflies were there for those insects. And then the birds came for those insects. That cycle was demonstrated. Now, this is part of today's Little Fall project. Now that the feeders are clean, and now that I'm filling them up, it'll be time to put them out and wait. Over the next few months, we'll get to see which birds stay, which ones pass through, and how wildlife around here changes as the seasons move towards fall and winter. That's one of my favorite things about living this way. Nothing stays the same for very long. I appreciate the change of seasons, although it may be harder in the winter. You just have to slow down enough to notice. And now we'll wait. It usually doesn't take long for the first birds to find it. It's going to be a new experience for Enzo. He thinks right now that he's a cat as he watches them flutter about. He can hear them. We'll have to see. Before long, the little feeders will become part of the daily routine. I always like watching for the first few visitors because they almost seem suspicious. They land nearby, they look at it, they look around, and then they eventually decide that yes, this is exactly what they were hoping to find. Well, the feeders didn't stay empty for very long. The first visitors were the chickadees. They always seem to be among the first to investigate anything new. They fly in, look around, grab a seed, and they're gone once again. Then came that glimpse of the beautiful American Redstart. Very timid bird, didn't stick around. It was interesting to see one here because redstarts spend so much of their time catching insects, especially during warmer days. Now those insects are becoming harder to find, and the landscape is starting to change for them too. And then you have the nuthatches showing up. They have a completely different way of using the feeder. Instead of hanging around for long, they move in, grab what they want, and head back to the trees. 3 very different birds already, but all responding to the same seasonal changes. The forest is still providing a little food, but as this summer is fading into fall, those sources are becoming less predictable. And that's really what these feeders are here for. Not to replace the forest, just to give those birds another option for what they need for survival. And that's where I'll leave it with the birds today. But I've been watching. There's something else happening around the feeders, something unfolding in the woods. I've been keeping an eye on it. I just discovered it yesterday. So that'll be in the Wildlife Wednesday. We'll take a closer look at them, see what's going on, give some facts about it as the seasons change and things slow down. I'll see you Wednesday. Thanks for joining me.